Focus too much on that, I don't want to make you feel down. But I just really wanted to talk about the vulnerability space by people with disabilities and how that relates to us and how we have a responsibility to promote a culture of life and how we're going to do that. So, I will just start with a quick quote. As I said, I'm not going to get you down, but then I go ahead and do it. So, this is from the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. And they say, like they put out a statement, it says, "We have seen in our own time great scientific advances perverted to harm the very humanity they are meant to protect. Prenatal testing and diagnosis are a tragic example of this. These techniques were developed to enhance the well-being of mother and child and foster the ability to deliver healthy babies. Yet, when the goal is achieved by delivering only healthy babies and denying life to those deemed less than perfect, a Machiavellian distortion of the good of these techniques intended is affected." So as I said, I'd like to go into it a bit more with you, sort of look at the idea that life for people with disabilities has improved over the last 100 years, but what runs alongside that obviously is this advancing technology and what that means. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about, as I said, not too much, about what Pope John Paul talked about as the culture of death. And then I'd like to talk about the role of disability in society and how it fits in and how it's actually important and necessary. And then I'm going to talk about our role in promoting a culture of life. So, as you may be able to sense, we're going to sort of get into a little bit of deep stuff, and I hope that it's not too late in the afternoon for you to focus, and if you're losing me, just put your hand up and we'll talk about that, whatever we're up to. And if I'm quoting too much, just be like, cut it out, or whatever. So, but I really did just want, especially because there is going to be a little bit of like talk of stuff which is a little bit sort of full on, I wanted just to start with a good grounding. So I wanted to start with a prayer. And I did have a PowerPoint presentation, but it doesn't matter, like, doesn't, yeah. So, and I have a little song which I wanted us to reflect on just to get ourselves in the right mood and the right place spiritually, just for all this sort of stuff. So I'll just start with a prayer and then I'll play the song, and if you guys can just listen and think about the words, you know them anyway already, I'm sure, but we'll go from there. Okay, so in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, we thank you for gathering us here and for the many blessings you've bestowed upon us. We pray that we may always be witnesses of your love and your truth in the world, and we ask for your strength and courage to always make the decisions for life. And we ask this in your name.
Lord, you search me, and you know me. When I sit and when I stand, you understand my thoughts from afar. Behind me and before me, your hand is there to guide me. Too wonderful for me, this knowledge is beyond my reach. Before a word is on my tongue,
given us a good grounding to sort of think about where we're actually coming from with this, and to really realise, I don't know if you guys have had a talk about identity yet? Anita and Tom talked about identity with you?
They were with the younger.
Oh, okay, yeah. But I'm sure that you guys have had lots of talks about identity. You understand who you are in God, and that's really important when you talk about this sort of stuff, to really sort of think about who you are and where it all sort of began. So just talk a little bit about disability. I guess it's traditionally been one of those sort of taboo, hidden subjects, and if you think back to what we know about people with disabilities, like back in Jesus' time, what we hear from the Bible, they were totally, completely shunned from society. You think, like, not even just like in a sort of like in terms of there was a stigma surrounding disability. Like, they were actually shut outside, the city walls. Like, they had to go out and be visited. Like, people with leprosy and that sort of stuff were. And I think there was like the stigma was different back in those days. They weren't really, there's lots of fearfulness, there is today still, and sort of misunderstanding about what disability was and how it sort of was passed from person to person. And I think lots of that was sort of people like surrounding curses. Like, people might have thought that if you were disabled, that was a curse on you and on your family. So jump forward in history, and we're not actually back 50 years ago, not that far away from there in terms of people who had disabilities. Like, there was more of an understanding about the fact that they actually had dignity, and that sort of stuff had been improved. However, they were still being institutionalised. If you had someone in your family who had a disability, then they would be sent off away from you and out of the family, which was just tragic. And they would spend often the rest of their life in an institution. My granddad, actually, I only found this out recently, but he is from Yass. He was on a farm in Yass, and he was born blind in one eye, and he had a brother who had some kind of limp. I don't know what it was. He had a problem with his leg, and so he limped. But his parents tried to hide both those disabilities from their friends and from society, not only for, it wasn't necessarily to do with the shame or the stigma that was associated, but it was also because they knew that people would encourage them to be sent away. And in the end, they actually were. They were sent away to a school in Sydney. Just the two of them, they were like 6 and 7 years old, these two little boys. And away they went, and I think they were there for 2 years before they were allowed to come back home. And they were visited like once or twice in that whole time. Like, it's just bizarre to think that that wasn't that long ago, and that was the perception. And people were trying to do the right thing. It's not like we were evil. It was just that they didn't really understand much about the need to be, why should we encourage integration and that sort of thing. So, as Naomi said, I'm a social worker, and so I studied social work at uni, and then while I was studying, I worked as a disability support worker, sort of taking people out of their homes, like doing activities or encouraging them in their home to become more independent or whatever that might be. And then once I graduated, I actually worked in 2 different organisations which tried to sort of encourage that independence and living skills and social awareness, all that sort of stuff with people with disabilities. So I can tell you for a fact that things have changed for the better. And when you think about things like, as I said, like deinstitutionalisation was a big thing, bringing people out of institutions and encouraging social inclusion. Also, there's been a big focus on the power of language and labels. Like, I don't really think I need to go into with you like the reasons why we don't call people retarded or spastic or mental anymore. Like, I think you guys are all aware of the progression of language and aware of labels and what they do to people, and so that's sort of been another big progression. There's been lots of actually legal recognition of people with disabilities in recent years. I think a lot of my resources are American, but that was always sort of fine. Australian stuff's sort of hard to find, but there is definitely an American law which says that a person is not of any less worth because they are disabled. So that's an interesting one to sort of keep in mind. And all that sort of like big progression, and it's where I work, the area that I work in. So I'm sort of saying, there's been progression. I hope that the work I do is of something. But at the same time, I guess, as I was talking about at the beginning, it's sort of like we've reached this new point. There's like a disability rights movement. People are understanding about the need to integrate and all that sort of stuff, and respect people with disabilities, realise their contribution is just as valuable as anybody else's. However, at the same time, there's this undercurrent, this subversive sort of culture which is encouraging like prenatal testing, and not just prenatal testing, like that's all good, like if you can prepare yourself for the fact that you might have a child with disability, but it's the tests that there is no cure for, if you know what I mean. Like you've got to ask yourself the question of why they're actually trying to find these things, and then there's pressure put on the parents, and it's sort of like this goes in a bit of a cycle. So Pope John Paul II talked about, in his 95 encyclical, The Gospel of Life, talked about this idea of a culture of death. So I don't really want to talk too much about it, but I'll just get it over with. So he says, we're facing an enormous and dramatic clash between good and evil, death and life, the culture of life and the culture of death. We find ourselves not only faced with, but necessarily in the midst of this conflict. We're all involved and we all share in it, with the inescapable responsibility of choosing to be unconditionally pro-life. Yeah, as I said, you might think that's dramatic, but Pope John Paul II wasn't really one to sort of overstate things. And it really is like this true life versus death, good versus evil struggle. And if we sort of have to awaken ourselves to that reality when we sort of think about the issues facing people with disability, because it's sort of like us at the coalface, if you know what I mean. Like you guys are just about to finish school. I think most of you going to get jobs and go out into university or out into the workforce, do a trade or whatever it might be. And it's the conversations that you have with your friends and with your peers and with your colleagues that make all the difference. And that's something that you sort of like, you might not even think of. But if you're not informed as to these issues, then it really sort of does make a difference in your life and in theirs. So, yeah, I'll just quickly talk about the National Partnership on Disability. Also talks about, it says, we're acutely aware of many dangers faced by people with disabilities or advanced age in this current climate of death. Many who seek the final solution of assisted suicide do so because of depression and fear of dependency and abandonment. Expected parents are counselled to abort a less than perfect child. Some children born with disabilities are left to die without the benefit of care, nutrition or hydration. Healthcare systems intent on cost containment and assuring quality of life deny needed medical services. People with mental disabilities or mental illness who are accused of committing violent crimes are often convicted, incarcerated and sometimes sentenced to death, this is American again, without the benefit of adequate and appropriate defence. So yeah, it's quite sort of full-on dense stuff, and there's all sorts of talk about, in the research I was doing, people talk about this whole idea of a new eugenics. You know, this whole idea of society actually trying to eliminate those that don't fit the perfect mould, and this is sort of one way that that's sort of happening in sort of a bit of a dark way. So I actually came across this article and I was hoping we could discuss it. I thought we'd do a bit of an activity. It's like an article from someone who's really, she's quite pro-choice, the way she puts it. And she's very out there, she's very angry at life and angry at the church, and all that sort of stuff will probably come through in what she says. But she wrote an article on her blog called Disability, Prenatal Testing and the Case for Moral Compassionate Abortion. So I guess the term compassionate abortion is something you have to sort of think about and think, well, where's she coming from with that? I'll just read you the beginning of her blog, and then I have some statements that she's made. I thought we might sort of split up a little bit and discuss them. And sort of imagine that, like if someone was saying this to you, like one of your colleagues is like, oh, what do you think about this? And said this as the way she had said it, how you might respond, things you might point out to that person, or you might agree with her. I don't know. I don't know, but I'm sure that you don't. I'll just read out her little beginning statement and just sort of prepare yourself. So she says, I believe that it is possible and desirable to respect disabled people while still working to eliminate genetic disorders so that children who might have had Down syndrome or cystic fibrosis or any other disease have a chance to live without them. That's all fine. This is where I divert from her thinking. And she says, I believe that abortion of a disabled fetus can be a compassionate choice made for morally sound reasons and does not at all conflict with respect due to disabled people, as in respect that's due to them. So she's basically, her blog goes on, basically she's talking about abortion can be a good choice, when a child's diagnosed with a disability or genetic condition, and she goes on to claim that certain families shouldn't have children, that parents, like in looking after their child, turn disability into a fetish, or like they hold it up too high, and also talks about the fact that children with disabilities can destroy families. So she's got some interesting perspectives.
So is she like saying, like, you know how cystic fibrosis, it's like 1 in 5 of children if you carry it. So she's saying if you're a carrier, don't have children.
That's pretty much what she's saying, and she actually, you see her language, she talks about how it's, she talks about the fact that it's really selfish for parents when they find out that their child has a disability to then bring that child into the world. Like, this is the language she uses. It's like, when I was reading it, I was sort of feeling a little bit like, it was making me feel sick, and I was talking to Luke, that's my husband, and he was sort of saying, yeah, but you have to remember that from where she's coming from, like, she doesn't see a fetus as a baby, and so, like, she's sort of thinking, well, you know, you go into the baby shop and you find out that one of the babies on the shop, you know, has a disability, and so to bring that child into the world is selfish on your behalf. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't see it as a child that already has a living thing, that
it's almost like
all that sort of stuff, that already is a potential person, is going to bring all sorts of stuff to the world that we don't know about. So it's sort of like you have to really get on a different mind plane to think of where she's coming from. So I have some little things that she said, and remember, these aren't things that I say, but I just want to sort of gather. I don't have to do all of them. Maybe like threes or pairs are better. I think I've got enough, or we can do some threes. Okay, it doesn't really matter, just whoever you're near or next to, or whatever. So you guys have that one. We have like five-ish. You guys right together?
What's her name?
Her name is something Sierra.
Oh,
Yeah, I've done really good research. So I've got 3 more. So if we have like 1, 3, 2 threes and 1, 2. I don't mind. You guys just want to.
I'm not.
Yeah. Whatever you. So yeah, just read about what she says. I think consider the fact that she's coming from a totally different grounding to what you or I. Yeah, maybe you guys are 3 now. And just imagine someone saying this to you, like a colleague or a workmate or someone at school is saying this to you, and just think about ways that you might respond. And then we might just sort of feedback after you've had a bit of time to think. We can discuss it more, like if you haven't really got answers. These guys are like, what? I don't know what to do. So if you haven't really thought about it, we can sort of feedback. Do you guys want us to read out what you had, and then we can all discuss it? Everyone would be
I am firmly pro-choice, and I believe strongly that the well-being of all born persons in a family is paramount before considering the needs of a fetus. My position is that fetuses are incapable of being self-aware and therefore cannot experience suffering the way born persons do. The prevention of suffering is central to my moral beliefs.
Okay, so does anyone sort of have anything they want to input there? Go.
BS.
Is that what you would say to her? See, this is why you have to sort of be respectful of her, otherwise she's going to block off her.
That's true.
Yeah.
Surely suffering is better than being dead.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't have suffering without, like, you can't have joy without suffering.
Yeah.
1 point. But her whole, that they're incapable of being self-aware, can't experience suffering. I would tell her about, I can't remember her name, there's a lady who was a manager at Planned Parenthood in America. She's written a story since converting to be pro-life. But she one day had to stand in and be the ultrasound technician for an ultrasound-guided abortion for a 12-week-old baby. And she said she writes this, that she witnessed as they put, sorry this is a little graphic, but as they put the thing, like as they put the thing in, she watched the baby squirm away from this thing. They know, like, by as far along as you need to be to get these tests done, they can feel what's going on.
Yeah, and my question to her, I guess in that point would be, so she thinks, baby's totally unself-aware, all that sort of stuff, but how can she be, how does she know that? Like, just because she can't remember being in the womb doesn't mean that, and they're finding out these things every day.
And like, there is, like, there's scientific evidence to say that babies feel by a certain age.
And my other question to her would be, okay, what about babies that are born prematurely and survive?
Exactly.
I presume that she would be, a proponent of late-term abortion. Like, you sort of think to yourself, okay, well, if it's okay, if it's in the womb right up till then, what about when it's out of the womb? Do you know, it's sort of like a bit of a, if you're gonna have that belief, you've got to take it all the way, but then you've got to start think about like Peter Singer and get all the way up there, because he actually does take his belief the whole way, and he is a proponent of infanticide. Like, he thinks that until a child is self-aware, then they are able to be discarded. So anyway, he's pretty full on. Does anybody else have any thoughts about that one? Or any others? What other ones do we have?
Do you want to read?
Okay, sure. I get that who we are is shaped by experience, and that many disabled people consider disability to be integral to their personalities, just as I see it as a formative experience for me. But I doubt they would have chosen to be disabled in the first place. Would they have voluntarily given up able bodies for the wisdom earned from being sick? Would they refuse treatment if it were available? Would they choose to suffer disabilities just so that their parents could have the reward and special gift of raising them?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? What did you guys think?
Well, what I was thinking was like every experience, like it says that, like shapes who you are today. And like many people, like good or bad, they've experienced like a lot of bad things, like maybe, their parents have split up or they came from an abusive relationship or whatever. But it's formed who they are now. And a lot of those people would look back and say, I didn't enjoy that, but I wouldn't go back in time and change it, because then I wouldn't be as strong as I am or, as knowledgeable as I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. And my main issue with her point there is she talks about, as you say, she talks about, if you could go back in time and choose whether you would be poor or choose whether you would be disabled, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, but like she's talking about taking that choice away. Like she's saying, you wouldn't choose it, and she's like, well then I'll choose for you and I'll tell you what you would choose. Like it's really sort of a bit of a paradox that she's thinking that you wouldn't choose it, but she doesn't know that. And then she's saying that we should make the choices for them because no one will possibly choose that. And it's sort of like, a contradiction, I think.
There are a lot of people that, like disabled people, that if you ask, would you prefer to live disabled or prefer to die, and they would say, I much prefer to be alive and disabled.
Yeah, and even if they are in a bad space and they would prefer to be dead, that's sort of a different topic altogether. Yeah. But the choice is theirs.
The choice is theirs.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not somebody else's choice to make for them, just, so that's a bit of an interesting one there. So, okay, so what other ones do we have? You guys?
If I somehow had a choice to be born in a body that was slowly disintegrate on me,
this is the
like
same sort of thing. Yeah, sorry, you keep going.
Stephen Hawking, or not be born at all, I'd pick the latter. This is a quote. Hanging out in the metaphysical waiting room before descending to Earth, and he told me he didn't want to be born into all that suffering. It would be unfathomably selfish of me to demand that he endured what he has endured just so that I could benefit from his mind.
What did you guys think?
I don't know. Tired.
Okay, so she was basically saying like if you're out in space and you're waiting to be born and you run into Stephen Hawking and you say to him, oh look, he says, I don't want to be born into all that suffering, and then she's saying it would be selfish of me to make him be born into that suffering.
So that we could benefit.
So
like if you talk to the fetus in the womb and said, I don't want to be born, and then you forced it to be born.
But the question there is, she's presuming that it doesn't want to be born.
Yeah,
but how,
we don't know.
We don't know, like...
I don't want it to be born.
That's exactly right. And how is that our choice to make?
The moment we can read... Okay, the moment we get someone that can actually read and talk to babies within the womb and they can make the choice, even then that's a bit euthanatory. But still.
Yeah, anyway. Right. So does that make sense? People sort of understand what she was saying there? Yeah. Okay, we might just go like one more, or what have you guys got? Oh, you go.
Wanting to eradicate a condition that causes suffering or dependence in a population is not the same as wanting that population to die. Imagine for a moment that we're not talking about abortion. If it were possible to cure Down syndrome prenatally, preserving the same fetus, would you deny your child the treatment because you'd hate to see fewer Down syndrome children in the world? But it doesn't preserve the fetus.
That's exactly right, yeah. So, and this is where she's on a totally different plane, and so it would be difficult to sort of argue with her on that point. But the interesting thing is she's saying, like, don't you want to eradicate Down syndrome from the world? And I have a position that I don't want to eradicate Down syndrome from the world. I think that while it would be good to find a cure, at the moment, disability has an important place in society, and I'll get into that a bit later. It teaches us about humanity and teaches us about, you know, like the dignity of every human life. But she's talking about she's not even talking about finding a cure. She's talking about killing babies. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's not talking about doing tests to like find cures about things. Her solution is, okay, what we do is we identify them and then we get rid of them. Like, that's not finding a cure. That's just genocide, isn't it? Like, that's not. But that's the whole eugenics thing. Like, anyway, she's got interesting points. That's why I wanted to sort of put it out there for you guys to get thinking. Like, you come along to a session like this and you might be thinking, yeah, I'm all for life, and then until God, someone asks you one of these questions and you think, ooh, I don't know how to answer that. So that's why it's important to sort of have critical thinking on both sides and sort of think about why you do think the way you think. So, I just wanted to quickly talk about, and we haven't got that much time left, the role of disability in society and why disability actually has an important role. And this comes back to, you've heard the saying, it takes all kinds to make a world, and that's actually really true when you think about, like, if we were all the same, if we were all perfect, if we all had no problems. Have you guys heard of the film Gattaca? Yeah. You guys will probably say, yeah. I thought it was more my generation, but maybe they make you watch it at school. I don't know.
Watch it in ethics with your sister.
Yeah. You know, so Gattaca, it's worth a watch. It's all about this sort of same. It's set in the future, which is probably like now. And just talking about, it goes into the whole idea of, basically that only the perfect people are allowed to be alive, and the others, like, they manufacture humans to be perfect.
You know, like designer babies?
Designer babies, yeah, all that sort of Brave New World type stuff. So, yes, but when we look at what we... what we know from the Bible and what the church teaches us, the church has been consistent all along in talking about the dignity of human life, from conception until natural death. It's like, you matter, you are important, you know, you are worth something, and that has been all the way along, and nobody else has a right to make a decision about that. Like, you've been created by God, and as we heard about in the song, Psalm 139, you know, like, He has a design for you in your life, and like, this is why it's so important for us to be protective of the vulnerable people who don't have a voice to protect themselves. To stand up and say, no, every life is valuable, every life has a role in this society. Like the UNICEF, when they teach about disability, they actually teach about the importance of inclusion, and they sort of say, you know, it's important not just for people with disabilities to be included, but for all the other kids as well, to understand that it makes a whole, like, it takes all different types to make up a community, and it teaches you about humanity and about vulnerability, and about what it means to be alive, fully alive, huzzah! And that comes to another point that she pointed out there, that she wants to eradicate suffering from the world. But we know as Catholics that suffering is actually really important. It has an important role in who we are, and it makes up part of our being. So I wanted to, I had it on my PowerPoint, talk about these stories of these people who, their disability, like, they are who they are, not in spite of their disability, but actually because of it. I was reading about, sorry.
I just had a question. Do you reckon with the whole, like, get rid of suffering thing, and, like, the whole idea of let's just eradicate it, like, if we can test for this, let's just eradicate it. Do you reckon if they could, like, test for, say, like, depression or something, which also causes so much suffering in the world, if they could test for that in the womb, would they just get rid of everyone with depression as well?
Well, this is the question, like, so you can test for disabilities, you can test for all sorts of different genetic defects, all sorts of, like, heart conditions that might develop, isn't that? but you can't test whether someone's going to develop into a rapist or a murderer or a
Exactly.
bank robber. You know what I mean? Like, so it's sort of like,
Or there are so many other things that cause suffering, and they're like, let's get rid of
That's
these
right.
because they're going to suffer.
yeah,
But so many other things cause suffering.
that's right.
You just
It's
can't
sort of a
get
bit
rid
of
of
a
it all.
warped sort of view. But anyway, these people who, yeah, they are who they are because of their disability rather than in spite of it. There's these 3 fighter pilots who fought in the Second World War, and all 3 of them happened to have no legs. And it actually made them these awesome fighter pilots because when you're doing like your G-force rolls and all that sort of jazz, the blood drains like into your face or into your head, and there's like you can actually go temporarily blind, or in like bad cases permanently blind, or in really worst cases dead. Happens sometimes. But they found out that these got 3 of them, all from different sort of areas, were like awesome at their skills because they didn't have as much blood to drain into their head, and so they were able to do like the most sick rolls and all this sort of stuff and like take out everyone because they had no legs. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't that they overcame their disability and they were awesome, and it's that actually what made them really outstanding was their disability. So that's just one to put out there. Another one, there's this wrestler in America, and he has no arms and no legs, which would be a pretty wild kind of life.
To be a wrestler.
Well, that's right, because he's got like this much and like that much, but he has become like this world champion wrestler, and he fights against like in high school competitions. He fights against like all the able-bodied kids. And the reason he's so good is because, like, when you're wrestling or boxing or whatever, you have to drop weight often. Like, you have to, you know, like get down to the right weight, and you have to weigh in, all that sort of stuff. But he hasn't got arms and legs.
So wouldn't it be just versing like teen or?
No. Get this. He hasn't got arms and legs, so they're heavy.
Yeah.
So he's like quite strong and thick in his torso, like quite buff.
So he's versing.
And so he versus, yeah, that's right, so what you're saying is right, yeah. I was like, no, yes. Yeah, that's right, so he gets to verse like the really scrawny guys, and even though he has no arms and legs, he's like really buff, and so he's like, yeah, take that, and like beats everyone. So that's another example of someone, and he, like before that,
And there's that Nick
Yeah.
guy.
yes, I had him on my video, that's right.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's cool. Yeah, and he like, the guy name you're talking about is this guy who also has no arms and legs, but he, and it's really sad, he like tried to commit suicide when he was 10 by drowning himself, but he got rescued and went on to live this awesome life. He's a totally motivational speaker, and it just, I think it's all about, sometimes it's really about perspective. You see people like this and they're doing these awesome things and they've got these things in their life to overcome. You just think, what are my problems, man? Like, what am I worrying about? Like, you know, bills or, I mean, you guys aren't worrying about bills, but assignments or, what are some of your, I'm going to shout out your worries to me, then yeah, I know, just put things in perspective. And there's a few more. There's this dancer, you should go online, look him up, Clayton Peg Leg Bates. He like, obviously, yeah, had a peg leg, but he was this awesome dancer. Like, he would just like hop on his peg leg and like do the spins and stuff, and like do cartwheels and stuff, and he's a tap dancer, and so like his peg was like the bass drum, and then his other foot was like the snare. Like, it like made this awesome, like, the other dancers didn't have the different like sound, but he had the boom boom, boom. It was really cool. And that, yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's heaps more like that, but I just want to give you some examples of the fact that, like, how, you know, in the womb, how are we to know what people want to become, you know what I mean? And the fact that, you know, like, it takes us all to become, like, the one body. I was going to talk to you a little bit about, I think I might leave it because you guys look tired. I was going to talk to you a little bit about the fact that when you're talking to a family like with a disability, I'll just talk briefly about it. You can't just be like, your child has awesome dignity and worth, and you should, you know, be really happy to have a child with Down syndrome or whatever it would be. Like, obviously that is where I'm coming from, and you guys might be coming from. Like, and you should be encouraging people to make decisions for life, and you know, like encouraging that person's worth and encouraging them to achieve their full potential. But you have to sort of be aware of the sensitivities surrounding that, and like, if you were a parent who unexpectedly had a child with a disability, like, that would be something that you'd have to really adjust to, and there would be a certain amount of legitimate grief and loss that would come with that, you know what I mean? So it's sort of like, while you're going to be gung-ho and encouraging life all the time, it's like you also have to realise that it's a little bit sensitive, like, and people make decisions for different reasons, and what, you know what I mean? Like, if a family decides to send a child away to an institution or whatever it might be, like, you can't just, it's difficult to be judgmental, is what I'm trying to say, like, you've got to just tread carefully. And there's this really nice, I'll read it out to you, really nice little like poem sort of thing called Welcome to Holland, which is written by the mother of a disabled child. So she says, I'm often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared the experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo, David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and in Holland you must stay. The important thing is they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you must meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're bragging about what a wonderful time they've had there. And for the rest of your life you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That was what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, never, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't go to Italy, you might never be free to enjoy the very special, very lovely things about Holland.
That's so good.
It's a good one. Good to think about. So that just sort of speaks into sensitivity as well. And I think that really, like, the way she talks about how there was that dream and that possibility, and then you are going to have some sadness associated with that, but not to dwell on that, because you know, each person has something different to bring. We've only got like 10 minutes left, I think, not even that. So I was just going to talk with you guys about our role in promoting a culture of life. And what that might mean. So I have a little, someone with disabilities, my little research, created, like, you know, the Beatitudes. Someone's created the Beatitudes for people with special needs. And it's just to talk about, like, things that we can do to encourage and, you know, like that, yeah, just be supportive and that sort of stuff. Yeah, and also just being sensitive. So it says, "Blessed are you who take time to listen to difficult speech, for you can help us to know that if we persevere, we can be understood. Blessed are you who walk with us in public places and ignore the stares of strangers, for in your friendship we feel it is good to be ourselves. Blessed are you who never bid us to hurry up, and more blessed you who do not snatch our tasks from our hands to do them for us, for often we need time rather than help. Blessed are you who stand beside us as we enter new, untried ventures, for our unassuredness would be outweighed by the times when we surprise ourselves and you. Blessed are you who ask for our help and realise our giftedness, for our greatest need is to be needed. Blessed are you who help us with the graciousness of Christ, for often we need the help we cannot ask for. Blessed are you when by all things you assure us about what it makes us individuals is not our particular disability or difficulty, but our God-given personhood, which no handicapping condition can confine. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for your understanding and life have opened doors for us to enjoy life to its full and have helped us to believe in ourselves as valued and gifted people." So that's just something to sort of go with. And I think you guys are all tired. I think I might actually finish. There's 5 minutes to go, but unless there's any questions anybody wants to ask, any sort of glaring things I've said which are like, that's not what the church teaches, what you say, put your hand up, speak now. Yeah, okay, that's all. Thank you. Come again soon.